Hello and welcome to another edition of the Ridgefield Playhouse Diversity Film Series. I'm your host, Cheryl Washington, of this bonus content. And today we talk about the 50th anniversary of Lady Sings the Blues. What a beautiful film we just had the chance to see. Now, let me just give you a little bit of background about Lady Sings the Blues. It's loosely based on Billie Holiday's autobiography back in 1956, which was co-authored by William Duffy. It premiered in 1972. Nominated for 5 Academy Awards, including Best Actress for Diana Ross, who made her film debut. Now, she didn't win that year. Interestingly enough, Liza Minnelli won for Cabaret. The film also starred Richard Pryor and Billy D. Williams, also known as the Dark Gable, Black Dark Gable. And so the film, which we just saw, really has come to light in the last 50 years. And we're going to talk about it now with someone who really is an authority, I would say, a preeminent authority on all things Billie Holiday. He may disagree, but I don't think that's inaccurate. His name is John Szwed, and he is the author of a book called Billie Holiday, the Musician and the Myth. He's also an anthropologist and a jazz scholar. And I want to welcome him to our set today. John, what a pleasure it is to have you here with us today with the Ridgefield Playhouse Diversity Film Series. So nice to have you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for asking.
My pleasure indeed. Now, we just had a chance to see the film. Now, I'm going to say that it has been a fan favorite for many, many years, but I guess we ought to start by saying that you're not necessarily a fan of the film at all. Is that true?
I have mixed feelings, and partly they've been shaped by the latest Billie Holiday film, which I consider really a problem.
What was the problem, John?
It's the United States versus Billie Holiday. Well, I mean, it's one thing to fictionalize, but when, for example, look, I had access to the same materials they had, and I know about the black FBI guy, which was, always an interesting puzzle, a guy who sympathized with it and nonetheless turned her in. When they make fictionalize them as lovers, and that she turns him on to heroin. Whoa, this is far from fiction to me. This is fantasy.
Well, now we talked about and we heard about in the film and saw, obviously, a lot of the vicissitudes of her life, if you will. I mean, talking about the heroin addiction, the alcoholism, the rape, the prostitution, all of those dark moments, racism, legal matters that really didn't transpire in a fair fashion. So is it, I think, a consideration of making it more theatrical so that the film could make money? Is that one of the reasons why that kind of a film showed that kind of life, as opposed to perhaps what we're discussing with respect to the United States versus Billie Holiday?
I guess I should say in starting that biographies have the same problems films, only films have a much more financial problem behind it. One writer can always be written off with a simple advance or something, but if you've got a stack of people piled up for years, you can't take chances. And the history of Billie Holiday films goes back to the mid-'50s, when there were some interesting attempts to do that. And I can remember well enough how it went. Diane Carroll was up for a possible first star, this sort of thing. But first choice would have been Dorothy Dandridge. Oh, by the way, just because I just discovered this, Dorothy Dandridge did do a sort of Billie Holiday film for TV, but it doesn't say that. And it's up on YouTube, of all places. It's called... Will I be able to remember something about the blues? I'll remember before we're through. Anyway, she got on there sooner or later, but never made the official film of it. Then there was a second attempt with, well, this is hard to believe, but Ava Gardner would play Billie Holiday. By the way, Billie Holiday turned down playing Billie Holiday, which I found interesting too. Now, Ava Gardner is an interesting case because there are people who believe that she was black. So, and she had the role in, what was it, Showboat, where she was playing a black woman, in effect. So Holiday actually thought that wasn't a bad idea because they were friends. But Jimmy Baldwin, if I may read a few sentences from Jimmy Baldwin on this subject, he said, my buddy Ava Gardner once asked me if I thought she could play Billie Holiday. I had to tell her that though that she was certainly down enough for it, courageous and honest and beautiful enough for it, she would almost certainly not be allowed to get away with it, since Billie Holiday had been widely rumored to be black and she, Ava Gardner, was widely rumored to be white. I love the way he is. I was certainly not making a joke. Or if I was, the joke was bitter, for I certainly know some black girls who are much, much whiter than Ava.
Leave it to James Baldwin.
Anyway, as crazy as it sounds, that was the atmosphere then. And then Ossie Davis was planning to make one in the 60s. And
I never heard that before.
Diane Carroll's name came back up again for that part. So that was someone who was always there. Now, I should say that some good things about this film right off the bat. I mean, it is, I believe it's safe to say, the first film to feature an African-American artist as a key role. I think that's probably true. It's certainly the first film to show the problems of racism in show business in a way that hadn't been shown before. I mean, if you look back to St. Louis Blues in 1952 on Nat Cole has no problems at all. He just blows through show business with, nothing can happen with it. It's also, I think, a rare film to show a black couple in a romantic relationship. There were others, but this is intensely so. Yeah. There were 5 Oscar nominations, and she actually got a Golden Globe award for Best Rising Star, whatever they call it at the time, the new star of the thing. And I have to say she was superb. I thought...
I was just going to ask you, did you feel that she was the right choice for this film? I mean, clearly because of Motown's connection, it seemed like a natural piece of casting, but did you find her to be as identified with Billie Holiday in terms of her aura?
Well, I mean,
certainly her music was going to be a little bit different, and she had said that she did not want to mimic or replicate what Billie Holiday had done. She wanted to make this her own.
Even more difficult when you have someone who's a performer, you're doing a biopic of them, because in case of Billie Holiday, she's inimitable. I mean, if I could put it in one sentence, there's no other singer who improvised so much. No singer. She did 600 and some recordings and did some of them over and over. They were never the same. They were radically different. And she sang behind the beat and in front of the beat. She phrased differently than other people. People admired this, but no one else could do it. So it'd be crazy to try to do that. And yet, and she was Diana Ross, and she had a big following. She just left the Supremes, and that was, some concern to people how that would work out. And I think she was unnerved at the idea, because she did say to Barry Gordy, who some say was in love with her, and he really wanted this film to go. She worried about was she authentic enough for the part? Yes. What about visualization? And if I remember the quote, Barry said something like, I think I get an exact quote here. Well, I can paraphrase it. White people are always fictionalizing their films. Why should we be stuck with the problem of this? Because he's got a good point. Because virtually any Hollywood film you can name with a white star had heavy fictionalization in them. The problem is, how do you get people to go to something which is anything but, how should I put it? If it has tragic outcomes, how are you going to get them to sit through it? And what are they going to take home? Does that mean you have to turn tragedy into romance? And how do you handle it? I don't know the answer to that. And I think it's puzzled a lot of people. So they started with that issue because, let me try it another way. Who are you going to blame if it's a tragedy? Well, in this case, in her book, she blames herself. And this is so rare. I mean, how many stars have ever said, this is my problem? I mean, but at the same time, she points out how institutions have failed her. And I'd like to come back to that, because it's my view that every institution she ever dealt with failed with her, from the police to hospitals to schools and so on, the Catholic Church. So it's really tragic in multiple levels. But nonetheless, she takes the blame. And in fact, she intended, and I've seen the copy of it, the last chapter to be a "don't do this at home" kind of thing. This is like, don't be like me. This is brave as hell. I mean, nobody talks like that in public. They may with friends and colleagues and so on, but this is, it's also hard to make a film like that. Yeah. So there's this, ending that says, folks, don't do this. So I give Gordy a great deal of credit for trying to handle a film that's really hard to make, if not really impossible to make perfectly.
And
Now,
especially during that time, because it was really up against some of those blaxploitation films, for example.
yes,
So this was
how
really
you,
a
how you
totally
get
different
that
genre.
audience and with
Right.
the other audiences together is a trick, particularly when drugs or drug dealers are somehow into that thing.
Mhm.
That stuff. I want to say, by the way, that while we're talking about actors, that I thought Isabel Sanford, the first madam she meets, has a very small but very good part. She
Very
was in All of the
significant.
Family
Yes.
and the Jeffersons. And the second madam was Lynn Hamilton, who was in Sanford and Son, no relation to Isabel Sanford, and Richie Pryor. I mean, who knew he was such an actor, you know? And
Yes. Yes.
Scatman Crothers of all people. These are kind of brilliant casting. Now,
Yeah.
Billy D.
Yeah.
Williams, I thought had a really tough job.
Well, you
He's
know what I read about Billy D. Williams, that he had flubbed the screen test, that he had messed up his lines. He really didn't think that he was good enough. He didn't think that he was even going to get past a second interview. But the synergy and the relationship between Billy D. Williams and Diana Ross was so impeccably amazing that they had to go with him. And he became this matinee idol.
he's a fine actor, and this is, I mean, he's got to play all three of her husbands in effect, and they were really some bad guys.
Mhm.
Um, and he does it with a straight face, and my only concern was he seemed more like her father than her husband at times.
Really?
Uh, he was too good to be true. I don't
Yeah.
know. But who are you going to get for that part? Now there's a little trick here that I didn't know till I looked at it again the other night. Um, Her third husband, who was alive at that point, in fact, had killed off Ozzie Davis's film, um, Louis McKay, was a bad guy, and he was a technical assistant on this film, so he had an input to it that it's kind of tough to imagine that going anywhere with it. He inherited all of her money, and but they were long apart from each other. I've read some of her notes where she said, "You're not a husband. You're just a guy who drops in once in a while. Why don't we just say we're good friends and I don't want to see you anymore?" So this takes a lot of work to condense all that and make it work with it. So I thought there's a kind of a 1950s feel about some of this, a
Mhm.
sort of hysterical woman and meets a I don't know, Let's go back to hysterical for a second. She was never thrown into a padded cell, never put in a straitjacket, and um, she worked in the kitchen, in prison. And in fact, Louis McKay had part of the problem getting her in jail. He was one of the people who got her there. She went along with it because she thought she'd get drug treatment, which she didn't get. So one more failure along the line. You see where I'm going with this. I'm a great Billie
I
Holiday
do. And I
believer.
remember even we talked about the United States versus Billie Holiday. There was that one line that was stated about Billie Holiday in which Andra Day had said that she didn't want any more jail time. She wanted help. And that seemed as though it was the real classic portion of what she really needed at that point. She really had gone through so much, all the turbulence that she had gone through,
Yes.
and all she wanted was someone to recognize the fact that she was almost in a desperate situation. No one was really coming to her defense.
Incidentally, what I've got to say is that while the credits are rolling, there's a little note which I'd never seen before, but it says if these are actual names of people, they're real. But if they're fictional names, the scene is fictional.
Hmm.
So all you have to remember is everyone who's not real in there has been imagined in. So the white Southerner who turns her on to drugs, that was peculiarly vicious because she was traveling with Artie Shaw's band, and Artie talked her into it, saying, "I don't care about the crackers. We'll do this, regardless."
Mhm.
And then he
Mhm.
lost a lot of money, and they had to go home, and it didn't work. But to blame one of the band members for this when they were all backing her on this and risking their lives, it seemed to me perverse. Anyway, Billy Dewey has this tough part to handle, and I don't think. How do you make a love story also tragic? I mean, how do you deal with drugs? Think of what happened in Ray or in On the Walk the Line.
Mhm.
Similar kind of problems. They seem awkward when they come to this because you don't want to preach to people and say no, 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 this is bad. But I thought my take on Holiday was that she was extremely brave and extremely shrewd and smart woman who has some bad choices in men, which I can't explain, and I don't do psychology, so I can't comment. She may have wanted a certain kind of protection that I'd buy, literal, physical protection, because she moved in some difficult circumstances. But I found, particularly since I saw the original draft of what she had before they cut out things for legal reasons, she had moved in very high company. To name a couple lovers of hers that were left out,
Well, Orson Welles was left out.
they have a little hint there, but Orson, he was out front with it. He moved into the hotel with her. They were rehearsing his films in his shorts. She said she didn't go to see Citizen Kane. She'd already seen it over the breakfast table. But I'm who's the daughter of one of the founders of the Museum of Modern Art. And father was governor of Connecticut, extremely wealthy woman. It's not, Tallulah Bankhead.
Tallulah Bankhead, exactly, Tallulah Bankhead. What was the relationship there? Because it was very subtle in the movie. What's the backstory of that?
What happened, they were actually very close, but at the time, Holiday got into trouble with the law. Tallulah was in trouble with the law. Her maid was suing her for abuse or something or other. So she didn't want anyone else coming in, her lawyer didn't want anyone else coming in to testify on this. So she distanced herself. But if you read the letters she wrote, particularly the one to J. Edgar Hoover, where she says, "How dare you let these crackers treat her that way," or her kissing her on a coffin, and weeping. That was a complicated relationship, and she was a complicated actress. And I can't imagine trying to get it on the screen, but there it was. Also, I have a big picture upstairs, which I had blown up, of Billie Holiday and William Faulkner standing along what I think is the Potomac, and they're both dressed up in party clothes talking. And I'm thinking, what in the hell are they talking about? But the fact is, that's the company she moved in. Not the downtrodden, but people who really admired her for this. And in a sense, it's really hard to make a film that's believable like that. I find it hard to believe. I've tried to run down what was she doing with Faulkner? Talking about lynching? I don't know. It's just crazy.
Let me ask you a question, because you wrote this book about her, and it's almost in two parts, if you will, because you discussed in the first part of it the musicality of Billie Holiday, and then the second part dealt with some of the other areas, some of the myths and the other things that we've dealt with, the dark side, etc. What drew you to come up with this package about Billie Holiday? What was it about her that enabled you to want to really dive deep into her heart and into her soul, into her life, to be able to bring this to fruition? What was it about her?
I think two things. One, she's one of the few singers from her generation that is still out there. Sinatra is another, but even Bing Crosby from that period is fading, except at Christmas time. But she turns up in coffee shops and video games, actually, and films, all over the place. So that was one thing. What does it take to last 80 years or whatever it is? And that. The other was that I lucked into finding two things: the original draft of her book before the lawyers cut it, and the book by the woman who did most of the research on her life and was writing a book on her and who killed herself without finishing it, about 800 pages from her. So it was so different from what I was reading and what I had heard. And then I contacted her co-author for her autobiography, his lover, and I got a lot more material. So it was just too good not to put out there. I originally didn't want to do that. I was just going to write about the music because I thought she had done something that no one else had ever accomplished. I've already talked about the fact that none of her songs are the same. A real risk for singers, because often the fans don't want to hear you change the song from the hit. Mm-hmm. They can't sing along with it. God forbid you should try to sing along with her.
Impossible.
Also, that I'm thinking of things like, and fooling myself. She has the line, "I see myself in the looking glass, but it's all staggered slightly backwards. It's off the beat. I see myself." And then she suddenly says, and I say, "How do you, fool? you're driving me insane. And that's super fast. How do you, fool? You're driving me insane. So she's compressing, stretching, and so on. Someone said to me, well, she's behind the beat. I said, well, she can't be behind the beat all the time. Or when it's over, the band would be would have stopped. So she's compressing it. No, I thought, how would you tell a singer you want to be really famous, be always off the beat? And then, as your big three songs, you're going to take Strange Fruit, which is about lynching,
Yeah.
God Bless the Child, which is about poverty, and Gloomy Sunday, which is about suicide. Hey, you're not going to get hits out of this stuff. How can you not be interested in this woman? She's daring. She's taking on stuff. Oh, by the way, they cut Strange Fruit, some of the best lines in the film. That's unforgivable.
Tell me why you say that.
I mean, they're making a point of what she'd seen, whether she did or not doesn't matter. She knew what was going on, and then to cut what she was so deeply involved with that she did night after night and decide we don't put that in. It's not that long a song. It's really quite short. I think they found it too threatening. The graphic reports about whatever.
What song would you say, John, best personifies who Billie Holiday is? Of all of the repertoire that she's got, what do you think would be the most pivotal song that really does embody who Billie Holiday is?
Well, you as you may know, when she got older, she lost a lot of her voice, but she had wonderful phrasing, and people. Miles Davis said, "I thought she was better." Now everybody else thought she lost her voice, but he said something about the maturity of her at that point to make the meaning more poignant and more moving in the process. So there's that. I guess if you take the earlier songs where she produced a lot of things, something like Fooling Myself, which I just mentioned, just because it's so wonderfully done. It's not one of the most popular. One song that she really liked and no one else pays attention to, what was it called? Had one name. Anyway, it's a song that's so difficult to sing that only two other people ever tried to record it. It requires big jumps and stuff and that kind of thing. Or you're giving me a tough question here. 600 and some songs.
I can move on.
Something like that. Or one of her favorites is her favorites are not other people's favorites. Just because it captures everything she has going for her. And, God forbid you try to copy her. It's just
right. Well, her interpretation of everything was just so extraordinary. I mean, she was just beyond.
Abby Lincoln might have done it.
Oh, Abby Lincoln, sure, yeah, that is true. That's a good point you just raised.
Has a look,
Yeah. That's a real good point.
Said about it. She said, "I'm not fooling anyone." This is at when she was doing Carnegie Hall. So people come to see me fall on my ass.
Let me ask this, because clearly, she died at 44 years old, and way too soon. She left us. What do you think her legacy today would represent if she had lived past 44 years old without all of the disappointments that she faced, the challenges that she faced, all the disturbances, all of the dark sides, all of those turbulences? What do you think the legacy would represent?
Well, I think her book is, I should have started by saying that a lot of people didn't like the book, but when you look at the reasons they didn't like it, they're not convincing anymore. Like, we shouldn't have told that, or it's okay, but we don't want to know that. That's not true anymore. People seem to will take anything. It's her honesty and her willingness to say this is what it costs to be a star, and she was quite a star. Mm-hmm. The idea of being able to only perform in major halls because the New York police had barred her from appearing in small clubs is nightmarish. And I don't know whether you know this, but Frank Sinatra threatened never to come to New York again if they kept that in place. The so-called cabaret law, which said any place that was serving liquor was barred from someone who had a drug conviction. It's just unholy. It's like it's taking people's livelihood away. And meanwhile, they can go to Carnegie Hall or wherever. I think that and her book is. Let me say this: Ethel Waters published a book about the same time, And Ethel Waters' book is not as well known anymore, but it was once extremely popular. It was even distributed to armed services overseas and so forth. And her life is equally as miserable. She's been treated as badly as some other people. I think the difference was that she'd gotten involved with Billy Graham and was doing gospel shows, and people would give her the edge and say, "Well, she's saved in some way." Whereas Billy is laying it on the line and saying, "This is my life," and there it is. Um, I just don't see many stars doing that. The other side of it, on the musical side, I noticed that a lot of younger singers will say things like, at first, she was off-putting. She didn't have the kind of voice I thought a singer should have. But then they get into the lyrics and how she handles the lyrics. And what's odd to me, but I guess not odd if I think hard enough, people sometimes treat her songs as if they were a life, or her discography is her biography. So they say, oh, she must have done this or that. Well, this is acting. She's acting. She didn't do all the things she says in those songs, but she's acting like a method actor, drawing on her past, pulling her experiences into it. And that's something I think younger people could understand if they deal with it. You bring something to bear on the song that's you. I notice that most writers about pop songs, they're writing about singers, will talk about the songs as if it were their life. Is that her boyfriend? Is that, that's pretty bad writing. It's guesswork, and it doesn't really address the issue. Is it a great song? Is she doing great work?
Right. Do you think that there's anyone today? I mean, we kind of hinted to it in terms of young people. Do you think that there's anyone who is in our pop cultural world at this moment who might be considered like the next Billie Holiday, or someone who is almost identical to her kind of brand? Is there anyone that you can think of?
It's funny, but there are probably more people who are like Ella Fitzgerald than there are Billie Holiday, because she was a very big star too. I don't know. I'm missing the first name. Swift. What's her first name?
Taylor Swift? Is that what you mean? Who?
A singer with really great phrasing and daring. I'm sorry, I haven't kept up, but I was very impressed by her. It's not Billie Holiday-ish. It's just that it has the kind of concern for the lyrics. It's just believable, when you buy the idea behind the song, you don't have to believe me, but you kind of get this across to you. I did a lot of reading and singing stuff, and I realized I had no idea before how hard it was to be a singer. Also, there's a YouTube video of backup singers telling you how hard it is to be a backup singer, which sounds harder than being the singer, because you have to match the singer to make her sound good. If she's phrasing this way, you got to do it.
Yeah, it's got to
So
be identical.
Every level, I didn't appreciate just what went into singing. It wasn't just the voice; it's a presentation of self. It's a commitment to the words.
Right. Can you give me, because your book is in fact known as the music as well as the myth, but can you give me another myth that most people would think was not necessarily true about Billie Holiday? Is there something that you can encapsulate that we don't know, that we thought we knew about her, but we really don't? Is there any myth that you can kind of point out?
Well, her co-author defending her, there were FBI people coming around to ask who tried to talk her into singing Strange Fruit, and he was furious. And he said, they treat her like this barefoot country girl who said, gee, I don't know, what those songs mean. I'm just, someone told me to do it. And he went on in a rage about this. It'd be so easy for her to say, and I think this is a crack at Ethel Waters, be so easy for her to sing some gospel songs, whether she believed them or not, and draw a different kind of audience. But she took the hard road with it, and see, actually have someone approach the FBI to protect you. I mean, this is a singer, for God's sake. Yeah. She wasn't dealing drugs. She wasn't doing these kind of things. I think I can't get this across exactly, but it was the daring and the courage to be what she was, and that's why I don't want to see her as a tragedy. And
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think when people first hear the name Billie Holiday, that's what really appears more than anything else. all of those dark images. And there's so much more to her life that brought light to the world that I think people ought to really be paying much more attention to. She was a force to be reckoned with. I mean, talk about an iconic figure. I mean, she might have been misunderstood, but certainly she had that genius quality.
Yeah, and some of the things I discovered, which were right there in front of me, I guess I didn't see them. I couldn't quite believe. One of them was a producer who got the idea that she should be produced like, not just like a singing star, but like an opera star. So he said he'd like to do, I forget what they're called. Anyway, to do a series of songs that are all the same sort, same tempo and so on, like opera singers often did.
Mhm.
Lottie Linya was doing them in New York at the time, doing her Brecht and Wild songs like Three Penny Opera and the like. So he wanted to have Carnegie Hall do this, and she said, "I don't like singing the same songs all the time, and I don't like to stick in the same order." So he's begging her to do this, and she did do it. And this is the stunning part. He didn't send out invitations to any of the pop writers. He sent them out to the classical writers, and they came through. I've lost my copy of this, but here are all these
Mhm.
names. The only one I remember is Bernstein, is on the edge, but they're all raving about her. The people who wouldn't even go to these shows otherwise because they had a free ticket and someone said go. But he kept away the people who were the obvious choices. Now, I don't know how she felt about it. It came off beautifully. I think she thought, this is crazy. Every song's going to be in the same mood, the same tempo. But it worked. It's a I don't know how to describe it. It's like a play of songs, a drama of songs.
Mhm.
So anyway, she'd reached the point where people thought of her at the operatic level. Hey, so,
John, I'm going to ask you just one more question before we wrap this up, and because I want to just go back to the movie itself that we just screened, Lady Sings the Blues. What would you think would essentially be the biggest takeaway from the film? Whether it's something that's a lesson that we learned, something that we extracted from Billie's life, or something that we learned about the music behind it. What's the biggest takeaway that you would have to analyze in terms of Lady Sings the Blues?
I think for me, it was that she was really, that is, Diana was really that good that she could say, she was very worried but there's all kinds of testimony that her books and others about could she do this? It was not just the acting part. Is I'm feigning somebody else, and she knew she couldn't do that. But then what would happen if she sang those songs? So she was working very hard to get the quality of the song and the authenticity of what she was singing, without being Holiday. I'm sure there are other people who tried to do that kind of thing, and it doesn't always work. I've seen some pretty good singers. It doesn't quite work that way. So to me, it was her risk as both a dramatic figure, an actress, and as a musical figure, doing music she would normally do and acting which she'd never done. And by the way, Mahogany is kind of interesting, but it's not as nearly as good as her work in that film. That was Berry Gordy's second attempt to make
Yes,
her a star. So to me, it's just how many people get put up for best actress on the one film,
that's
and not
right.
even a little film or TV spots that are acted out. It's terrific.
It
She was a
certainly
good
is.
match in a different way to Holiday, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. John, I appreciate you talking to us. You're a wealth of information when it comes to music and life in general, and all things. As I said before, Billie Holiday. I learned quite a bit more about her from you than I even expected. So I appreciate you giving us some insight into Billie Holiday, because she really was someone who was quite an amazing figure. And I don't think that the world really will ever forget her. Her legacy will live on forever. She
80
was just
some years
something
is a
else.
long time for any singer
Yeah,
to
to
last, I think.
yeah,
Much
for
movie
sure,
stars.
for sure.
And by the
And
way,
thanks to
she did
people.
make a movie. What's it called? New Orleans? Yeah. She did
Mhm.
make a movie, and she's pretty good in it. Hey, by the way, she played a maid in the thing, and she was complaining about the role. And Ethel Waters said, "It's better to be paid to play a maid than to be a maid."
I might concur about that.
Well, thank you.
John, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. You were such a delight and such a historian, I have to tell you, because you had a lot of good information, a lot of sage points that were quite fascinating, quite memorable. And I thank you so much for joining us today on the Ridgefield Playhouse Diversity Film Series. What a gem you are. I need to see another book from you, though.
Well, I'm going to do one on Max Roach, who's not as well appreciated, but as a civil rights and activist figure and married to Abby Lincoln.
Abby Lincoln. Yes. It's funny because we talked about Max Roach just a week ago with the series for Summer of Soul. Because he was part of that Harlem Cultural Festival, right? The Black Woodstock. Yeah. So I'll be looking forward to reading that.
Max Roach had 9 honorary degrees. Try that one on for size.
I don't have one. John, but listen, you're a brilliant scholar too, so we know that you've got plenty of degrees.
I appreciate what you're doing there at the Playhouse.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you. Thank you for joining us once again. I just want to plug your book once again, Billie Holiday, The Musician and the Myth. We've been talking with John Szwed, and we thank you so much for joining us today. What a real treat for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. A real pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Well, that wraps up this edition of our Ridgefield Playhouse Diversity Film Series, in which we analyze, I hope very well for your sake, Lady Sings the Blues, the 50th anniversary. What a remarkable film. So we want to thank also the Aquarian Water Company for sponsoring this edition of the Ridgefield Playhouse Diversity Film Series bonus content. Once again, I'm Cheryl Washington, always proud to be with you, and I always learn something from this series. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.